Hey guys, so this time I have Empire of Sun style for you again. So I have been fiddling around with lists a bit and I came to this one. So previously I didn't see the option of having a Marshal with the banner of the Relentless Company and the Marksman's Pennant on a Pegasus. Well, the Pegasus is actually missing in the list, I see, but he's on a Pegasus. And the idea behind him is that he's gonna start out in some state militia. He can use the banner of the Relentless Company to sling them forward, and then he can himself go into the Riders, where he will give them the he will take away the penalty for the stand and shoot. And I thought this was a neat idea, just to incorporate into a list. And then the result is that your BSB is a highly mobile guy, and you're not really sure anymore where he's gonna end up. So I thought it would be best to pair it up with some flagland blocks that don't need a BSB at all. And then the rest of the list basically follows from that. So yeah, it's a really creative list in the sense that it's really different from what you usually see for Empire. But I thought the only way to find out if it works or not is to just put it on the table once. Yes, so then my opponent was bringing Ogre Khans. So this is my opponent who usually brings Infernal Dwarves, but now he wanted to try out his new Ogre Khan army. And from the pictures later you'll be able to see that it's a really new army because it hasn't been painted at all yet. But it's gonna be painted, so someday it's gonna look epic. Yeah, so he just has a kind of a basic Ogre army. But then I know that a lot of people just run a Shaman with the Crown of Autocracy and a Khan BSB. He also has a Great Khan General, so he doesn't need a Crown on his Shaman. And this Great Khan, with the Kagada's Legacy and the Headhunter, he's quite a killy character. So let's see what's gonna happen in this matchup. Here's some army pictures of my army and of my opponent's army, and then we'll go into the match. So we played Refused Flank and Hold the Ground. So the goal is to have your scoring units in the middle of the board. And for me this is a bit of a bad scenario because, my scoring units are only the knights in this list, and I only realized that after I had built the list and put it on the table. So probably for future games where I'm going to play a list that is similar like this, I'm gonna definitely include a couple of more scoring units that can hold their ground a bit better. Yeah, so I got to choose the table side, and I choose the side on the bottom right. This because on the top left you can see a water feature, and my infantry is not really comfortable in this type of water. So I think in hindsight I should maybe have taken the side on the top right, because I was going to play defensively anyway. And the only thing is, if the flaglands were going to have to charge through the water, that would be a bit of a shame, because it would result in me losing a lot of models. So I think, yeah, after all, I might have still made the right choice in the end. Even though the impossible terrain also does make sure that I don't have as many lines of fire as I would like to have. My opponent then just dropped his entire army in order to get the first turn, which I think was a good move against this army, because he just wants to minimize the shooting output that I have. And yeah, if you add in an extra turn for me to shoot, I'm obviously very happy about that. Because if he hadn't dropped, then I would have definitely just dropped everything. So in terms of his deployment, I think that he still made a bit of a mistake putting the big Ogre Bass all the way on the left. But in this case it doesn't really matter, because my deployment is a bit congested with the building on the right. Had the building not been there, I could have been able to put nearly all of my army all the way on the right. And then his Ogre Bass would have taken a bit more time to arrive. So in that way, the Tusker Cavalry would have arrived first, then his small unit of Ogres, then his big unit of Ogres. And in this way you can really partition up the army of your opponent, whilst still harassing them with the other troops that could be on the side of the, on my middle table side, basically. Yeah, so his deployment has been done, and after that it's my turn to deploy everything. and I figured that for my center I might as well just use the flagellants, because they are going to be the best suited to face off his big combat units. And I haven't used flagellants that often, so I know that they can hit hard at least once, and then afterwards it's the question of how many flagellants are still alive. But having a prelate in there to give them hatred with the battle focus they already have, with strength 5, with the horde formation, so 24 attacks that will definitely get to strike because of the flagellant rules, you will end up with likely 24 hits after re-rolling your 2 hits with battle focus. And 24 hits at strength 5 is nothing to be ashamed of if you're playing with them. And then, yeah, so the rest of the deployment, I have the state militia on the outsides of my line, and I have the cannons in the back. So the cannons in this matchup, they can really benefit from the fact that my opponent is just bringing large size models or larger ones, and I have a clear view onto his lines anywhere he goes. And the Reiters, they basically form the last defense barrier with their repeater guns, and they have a very nice field of fire in between both flagland blocks. So I was quite confident still about this this kind of cauldron type deployment, where my opponent just has to run in, and then I'm gonna try to just minimize his units just as quick as I can, and then hopefully minimize them to such an extent that I will be able to handle them. Then my opponent started coming towards me, and yeah, this is something that I realized that was not good about the list. I don't have any piece in the list that can actually hold a charge. So also nothing, just there. So normally in an Empire list you still have your steadfast units and steam tank possibly. In this list I don't have any of this, so not even one unit of mine is steadfast. It's just the flagellants that are unbreakable for sure. But then, yeah, that's my only 2 combat units. So, yeah, I sacrificed a lot to get this BSB in there that can just slingshot out one of these units of state militia once in the game. So I think this is definitely a list that's to be considered a fun list rather than a competitive one. Yeah, but it's definitely fun to play at least once. So to sum up my opponent's first turn, he mostly just advanced across the field, and then he casted some magic and did some shooting. So with the magic he cast the Swarm of Insects on my Hellblaster, and I couldn't really dispel that one because it was quite a high roll, so otherwise he would have gotten the Totemic Summon, Break the Spirit, or also this spell that gives you -1 to hit, I believe, or to wound within 6 inches of a target. And those are really costly spells also for me, so I had to let it through. And this is also one of the reasons that I don't like volley guns in general with Empire. So you have a 24-inch range on an immobile piece that has to have a line of sight to its target without any cover. Those are conditions that are rarely filled, and then even then, if you're at long range, then you hit on 5+. Normally that goes to 6+. If you roll a 6 for the amount of hits, you're not doing a lot of hits in the end, and then it's just a static piece, so there's going to be this one turn where it's going to be effective, and otherwise it's not going to be effective at all, most likely. So yeah, I had to let it go through, and then yeah, he cast this bubble thing on my unit of Rangers, where the rest of the shooting is going to be less effective if they're close to them. So I moved out the Rangers from the Reiters, so that at least the Reiters would have a better shot. And then in this case I didn't realize that the Tuskers were closer than I thought they were, because now they're at 18 inches, so that's a 10-inch charge. It could still be fine, of course, but it could also not be fine. So the Flagellants, they move forward to shield the volley gun that could move, because it couldn't shoot anyway. And then on the right I had an advance with the state militia towards the thunder cannon, and I thought that maybe I could remove it from the field with my 24 shots, and then also still 2 possible cannon shots on it. The knights on the right, they actually tried to charge already, I believe, onto his Tusker cavalry, and they didn't make it, unfortunately, because I think if I had a charge with my knights on the Tusker cavalry in the flank, there might have been a decent chance that I would actually make him lose combat. And he was, I believe, out of general range, but within BSB range. But still, if I win the combat in the flank, if I'm able to just break him, then it would make a big difference in the game. So I was very happy with this charge, but unfortunately I didn't make it. And also the Flagellants, I believe they had a charge, but they also just didn't make it. Yeah, so then for shooting and magic, my magic was mostly ineffective, just getting a corruption of tin on his big ogre block. So I had a Quicksilver Lash. The Quicksilver Lash actually also went through, I remember, onto the Tusker cavalry, dealing some wounds. But well, alchemy is not the ideal lore against ogres. So I also took the number 1 from Cosmology, the altered side, to make my shooting a bit better. But my opponent wisely dispelled this spell. Because with the Riders, if you get a +1 to hit, it's going to be another 6 hits, likely. And that, yeah, it might do it, because it's strength 4, AP2. So that's quite likely just 2 wounds on a Tusker cavalry unit. And then if there's going to be a stand and shoot later in the game, then yeah, that might also be affected. The State Militia on the left, they did the movement trick that I was anticipating, but it was not really effective at all. So as you can see, the effect of me slingshotting the State Militia forward is that I could block his Thunder Cannon and his Bombardiers. Oh, yeah, well, it's not really worth it, to be honest, especially since the unit that I took was a 25 unit of State Militia, and you just get one turn where you can shoot with your pistols on a 4+, which is nice. But then again, if you have 24 shots and you just roll a bit badly, you just get like 8 hits or so, and then yeah, that's all. Because if you're within 6 inches of your target, you're gonna be within 6 inches of your target, because that's the short range of your pistols. Otherwise, you're gonna be hitting on 5s, and then for the standard shoots, you would be hitting on 6s, which is, yeah, you can just ignore that basically. So you're gonna be within 6 inches, and there's a lot of stuff in the game that has a 6-inch charge range. So you're gonna be within the short charge range of your opponent, so you won't get a standard shoot. And also at that same time, you're gonna have a lot of models in your unit still that have to shoot at long range, so longer than 6 inches. In the end, it didn't really work. So I think these units really work well if they're able to go to the flank of your opponent and then can harass them for a long time. But to build a list to specifically be able to do this is not gonna work all times, and the times that it doesn't work, it's going to be really frustrating, I think. So my thoughts about improving this list is mostly to get more Flagellants, split up the State Militia in units of 15 or so, make the BSB different. He doesn't need the Relentless Company banner, and well, the Riders are nice, so especially if you have some Flagellants in the middle, some State Militia for the flanks, and then the Riders, they can be the hard-hitting flank unit. And the Marksman's Pennant on these guys is quite funny. Just to have a specific BSB to go in there on a mount that is light troops is probably not worth it. Like if you, I don't know what's gonna happen actually if you put him just on a horse. But I could imagine that the unit then loses light troops, which is totally not worth the sacrifice. So you would have to have a Pegasus probably. But the Pegasus can be picked out of the unit by cannonballs and magic and stuff. So I don't think it's worth the effort in the end to get just a better chance at your standard shoot reaction. Yeah, so my opponent's second turn, he just slams into my lines, as the Ogres were expected to do. So he does slam into my State Militia, and he just mops them up with his Thunder Cannon actually. And he slams into the Flagellants in the middle with his big Ogre Bus and his 2 remaining Tuskers. And also the Tuskers that had a charge on a 10 into my Wizard Bunker, they do manage to charge in there and make the charge. And they obviously clean up the Rangers together with the Wizard. they get an overrun into the volley gun, and things are looking really bleak for the Empire right now. Yeah, this is not good. This is definitely not good. Also in terms of objective, as I said before, I didn't have anything that could contest it, basically. So yeah, this was not gonna happen. Yeah, this definitely just doesn't look good. He could still chaff up my flaglands with one of his war dogs, his saber-tooth guys. And the state militia on the right, they're actually in a good position now because they can just march up and shoot into the BSB bunker. But then again, the advantage that you get from that, it's only very minor. And also, I must admit, this game I thought that the range of the pistols was only 8 inches, so that was a bit of a mistake on my side. It's actually 12 inches, so you have a bit more leeway with them, but still, it's going to be a struggle to make the most out of them. If you compare it to an Empire army list where you just take heavy infantry with some light infantry that supports with 24-inch range for the handguns or 30-inch range for the crossbows and the ability to get orders, then you're gonna have a way more effective gun line if you're going for a gun line. And yeah, I think this type of hybrid gun line skirmishing guerrilla kind of thing, it just doesn't work because your units are too big, you have too low movement, you don't have any way of improving your movement, unlike with the parent support units where you can still increase your march value. Yeah, it definitely doesn't work in my eyes, but still it could be a fun list to try out. Or just 3 blocks of flaglands, just some skirmishing state militia to go in front to annoy the opponent and make sure to just screen your flaglands basically and get the charges where you want them. Yeah, that could work, but just as a fun list, not as a competitive list, I would say. This game I also discovered a bit more the potency of flaglands. So flaglands, they can strike really hard, but if your opponent gets off a couple of buff spells to increase the resilience of his units, then strength 5 becomes a bit less interesting, and you do some wounds. So in the end I did like 10 wounds to the Ogres, which is still quite a good performance by the flaglands, but then they also died. Like, I have 4 flaglands remaining after this turn, and sure, they're unbreakable, but yeah, it's not gonna last. So in my turn, I charged in my BSB to try and save the day, because my opponent can only get the 4 wounds off the flaglands, still has combat res, and then the BSB, he charges in with his shield breaker into the Tuskers. I was just curious what Shieldbreaker would do, and also I was curious whether the BSB would hold up against these Tusker Cav, because the Tuskers, they only, or the Riders, they only have strength 4. The Tuskers, I believe, they only have strength 5. Yeah, strength 5 is actually quite high. They have 4 attacks each. I was going just for the lucky roll of being able to kill a Tusker with the Pegasus and the BSB, and then hopefully not getting slaughtered by the other Tusker. Yeah, and then otherwise the state militia, they do move up to shoot the BSB bunker. The Knights, they do move up to get back into the field. My Knight Commander actually also charged into the Tuskers that were charging into my volley gun to try and save the day there. But he didn't make his charge, so that was really unfortunate, because now I'm stuck with a Knight Commander who's just outside of a unit. Outside of the unit with a household standard even, so my inspiring presence range is now reduced also to 12 inches, which is what inevitably happened by charging him out. But the chances for getting the charge in were quite high, so I thought I should risk it. And yeah, otherwise, the funny thing is that I have this unit of Riders that can really shoot quite hard, but yeah, I'm just blocking up my zones of fire by getting combat everywhere. So yeah, I think that as a main line unit, this unit of Riders of 10 might be just too big. So it should have gone just all the way on the flanks. Even though in this matchup I didn't really have a lot of flanks that I could could make use of, otherwise, other than the top side of the board. But then again, as my opponent decided to just turn all the way to the flank with his Tusker cavalry, then these riders wouldn't have been able to stand up to that, I think. But yeah, otherwise I still have my 2 tech cannons, and well, we're playing empires, so in the cannons we trust, right? So yeah, cannons against ogres are always a really good asset, and I can see it now again, because my opponent has just this bunker of tribesmen, but he doesn't have a banner in there, and I think it's the banner that gives the unit the minimum requirement of only 3 rank and file models that you need to get a lookout sir, or what used to be the lookout sir, where you can't target out characters from the unit. And anyway, he's below the 3 rank and file now, so I can just use my cannons to start sniping his BSB. Yeah, and that actually kind of works out. So the first round I shoot at it and I misfire with one of the cannons and I miss with the other, I believe. But still, the pressure you put on your opponent by just shooting every single turn is quite okay. And yeah, in a matchup like this where you can just shoot at a unit, and if you get the guy down, it's going to be like 600 points, 700 points. The 250 point per cannon investment is not that big. Then after all, like even if they don't manage to do it in the first couple turns, then well, at some turn it's probably gonna happen that you knock out the BSB. Yeah, so combat happens. My BSB, he actually manages to take down one of the Tuskers. I believe he already had a wound on the Tusker or so. And then yeah, then the rest of the combat results in my flaglands getting smashed and my volley gun going off table. So my opponent has a free charge with his Tuskers into the rear of my BSB, and he's not gonna like that. But the funny thing is that his big unit of ogres is kind of stuck now between the Tusker cavalry model and the piece of impossible terrain on the bottom of the middle. So that is a weird position for a unit to be in, right? So luckily I'm separated from his main combat block by just a line of stuff that we both cannot get through. And yeah, he's just trying to reorganize his lines a bit. But it's just a combat that needs to happen for him to be able to clean up this mess, basically. So this turn he does manage to kill the BSB. He still has a Tusker that's in way of his ogre block and is gonna be there for still some time, or at least until well, the next turn he can also not do anything with this big ogre block, and then afterwards he can move away the Tusker model to free up his ogres to come after me another time. So this time I do charge in my Knight Commander into his Tusker cavalry, and I also try to charge off my knightly orders into the side of his last remaining Tusker. So maybe this was actually a bad idea, because well, one of the possibilities was that this Tusker cavalry model would go down, and then I would actually free up his ogre pass, so that maybe I shouldn't have done that after all. So my turns by now are really quick because I don't have any magic anymore. The shooting is quite limited, especially since I relocate my riders all the way to the corner. So my Knight Commander goes in with his Titanic Might, and he smacks down with, he has a total of 4 attacks, and he does 5 attacks, so 4 attacks for the rider and 1 attack for the mount. And he does a total of 5 wounds, so even the horse managed to just do a full wound. And the rider, he does hit on 3+, and he does wound on a 2+ with AP 3. So that's quite good, but still there were lucky rolls to ensure that I did a total of 5 wounds. The only downside was that my opponent did 3 wounds to my model, and I didn't manage to make any saves, and I didn't manage to survive, basically. So I lost my model, and then you don't have any combat res, of course, and then yeah, he just got a free Knight Commander out of that, basically. So yeah, getting a Knight Commander is nice. Maybe if you gear it up for combat, the Winter Cloak is a good idea to give him distracting, and a 5+ Aegis, and also a 2+ Fireborn Aegis. I think it's a neat item just for 70 points, because if you compare it to just the Talisman of Shielding, you get distracting on top for 20 points and Fireborn. Just for these matchups where the opponent has a fire weapon and you can go like, ha, I have a Winter Cloak, so you're not touching me, basically. Yeah, so then we go, well, regarding the combat of the Knightly Orders, into his Tusker Calf. My Knightly Orders, they went in and they didn't do anything, and then the Tusker Calf killed the Knight. So that was a draw. Well, I charged in the flank with a banner, and he had a wound, so he lost by a little, but he managed to just stick around. And then my opponent gets counter-charged with his Tusker Cavalry into the flank of my cavalry. So you might be wondering at this time what happened to the cavalry in the top right. So my opponent charged at some point into the state militia, and I decided to flee with those. They only fled 6 inches, which did not take them, I believe, into the knights as I had hoped. And then my opponent actually made the roll to catch me, which meant the panic test for the knights, because they are not a parent unit in this way. And then my knights failed, and they started fleeing, and they didn't rally anymore, so they were off the board. So that was really a disaster. Yeah, so what I have left by now is just my cannons and my unit of riders, and 4 flagellants with a prelate in there, because my opponent, he just grinded down my flagellants with his bombardiers. And if you shoot at them turn by turn by turn within short range, then the damage really gets through. So my opponent is really happy to have his big ogre bus finally freed up, and he nearly has his entire army left, so yeah, he's probably quite happy about this. And then he charges in his Tusker into the rear of my flagellants, together with the wolf, with the Sabertooth in front, and he just closes in on the last final bits of my army. So the cannon on the top, he's kind of ignoring, and then the riders all the way in the bottom right. He also wants to get those. So we'll see what's gonna happen there, but it's looking quite bleak for the Empire by now. So my opponent with his magic face, he still manages to inflict 3 wounds onto my riders and panic them off the board. And then the rest that still happens is that I believe I actually managed to knock down his Tusker Calf and the Sabertooth in the combat, because he doesn't do any wounds to my flagellants, so that was great. And then in my turn I still managed to snipe down his BSB from his unit with my cannons. And then I believe that was actually his last turn. So yeah, then we stop the game and tally up the points, and it's a clear victory for the Ogres. So it might be a combination of just a terrible list on my side and a bit of a bad matchup, possibly, because Ogres against Empire is, I believe, a bit of a bad matchup for the Empire generally. But then in the end, it was a funny list to play for some time. I don't think I'm gonna try and make it better, or to increase its potency, because I think the base is something that is not good. Yeah, so thank you all for watching, and see you the next time.